But the Grail may not leave this land, but must wait the Pendragon till the day comes. So therefore I trust it to this land, over sea and under stone, and I mark here the signs by which the proper man in the proper place may know where it lies, the signs that wax and wane but do not die. The secret of its charge I may not write, but carry unspoken to my grave. Yet the man who finds the Grail and has other words from me will know, by both, the secret for himself. And for him is the charge, the promise, and the proof. And in his day the Pendragon shall come again. And that day shall see a new Logris, with evil cast out, when the old world shall appear no more than a dream. Great Uncle Mary stopped reading, but the children sat as still and speechless as if his voice still rang on. The story seemed to fit so perfectly into the green land rolling below them that it was as if they sat in the middle of the past. They could almost see the strange night Bedouin riding towards them over the brow of a slope, and the longships of the invaders lurking beyond the gray granite headland and its white fringe of surf. Simon said at last, "Who is the Pendragon?" "Pendragon." "King Arthur," Barney said. Jane said nothing, but sat thinking of the sad Cornishman sailing away over the sea from his threatened land. She looked at Great Uncle Mary. He was gazing unseen down at the sea and the headland beyond Trewisic, the taut lines of his face relaxed and wistful. "When the old world," he repeated softly to himself, "shall appear no more than a dream." Simon scrambled to his feet and went to crouch close to him, peering at the manuscript on his knee. "Then the map must show where the Grail is. I say, suppose we find it. What will it mean?" "It will mean all kinds of things," Great Uncle Mary said grimly, "and not all of them pleasant, perhaps." "What will it look like? What is a Grail, anyway?" "A kind of drinking vessel, a chalice, a cup, but not like an ordinary cup." Great Uncle Mary looked at them gravely. "Now, listen to me. This map you have found shows the way to a sign which men have been seeking for centuries. I said that I had been looking for it, but you remember I said that there were others too, the enemy side, if you like. These people are evil, and they can be very, very dangerous indeed." Great Uncle Mary spoke with great seriousness, leaning forward, and the children gazed rather nervously back. "They have been very close to me for a long time now," he said, "and here in Trewisic they have been close to you too. One of them is the man Norman Withers. Another is the woman who calls herself his sister. There may be others, but I do not know." "Then the burglary," they stared at him, and Jane said, "Was it them?" "Undoubtedly," Great Uncle Mary said. "Not in person, perhaps, but they must have been behind it all. The ransacked books, the stolen maps, the attempt to look for a secret hiding place under the floor. They were very near, you know, nearer than I. When I rented the grey house, it was no more than a shot in the dark. I had narrowed the search down to the Trewisic area, but that was all. And I had no idea what I was looking for. It might have been anything. But they knew. Somehow, in some dark way, they had found out about the manuscript, and they came after it last night. Only they hadn't bargained for your finding it by chance first." He smiled slightly. "I should like to see Withers' face today." "Everything fits now," Simon said slowly. "The way he made friends so quickly with Father, the way he took us out in the boat." For an unpleasant moment he thought he heard Great Uncle Mary's voice saying again emphatically, "They can be very dangerous indeed." Barney said, "But, Gameri, did you know that we should find it? Whatever it was. Us, I mean, me and Simon and Jane." His great-uncle looked at them sharply. "What makes you say that?" "Well, I don't know," Barney fumbled for words. "You must have looked before we came, and not found anything. But when we did come, you were never there. You kept on disappearing, almost as if you were leaving the house to us." Great-uncle Mary smiled. "Yes, Barney," he said. "I did have an idea you might find it, because I know you three very well. That was one idea I had before our friends did, so that for all their interest in the Grey House, they were still worried about what I was up to. And I led them a high old dance all over South Cornwall while you were at home. I was, you might say, a red herring." "But what—" Barney said. "Oh, never mind," Simon broke in. He had been hovering restlessly at Great-uncle Mary's elbow. "It's all obvious now. The thing is, what about the map?" "You're quite right." Great-uncle Mary sat down by the rock again. "We haven't any time to lose." "It's a map of Trewhisk," Simon said eagerly. "Jane found that out, only the coast seems to have changed." "I was comparing it with the map in the guidebook at the Grey House," Jane said. It hardly seemed worth mentioning her visit to the vicar. "The funny thing is that though the outlines of the coast don't look alike, the names are the same. If you look very closely on the manuscript, one of the headlands is called King Mark's Head, only it's spelt all wrong. And that's the name the guidebook uses for Camar Head. So the manuscript must show Trewhisk." "That's right," Great-uncle Mary said, bent over the parchment. "Simple corruption, dropping consonants." His head shot up. "What did you say?" Jane looked puzzled. "Did you say it was called King Mark's Head in the guidebook?" "Yes, that's right. Does it matter?" "Oh, no." The usual remote expression came back over Great-uncle Mary's face like a veil. "Only that particular name hasn't been used for a long time, and most people have forgotten about it. I should like to have a look at that guidebook of yours." "I don't understand this." Simon was peering over the old map. "Even if it is Trewhisk, where does that get you? It's the most useless treasure map I ever saw. There are all sorts of peculiar marks on it, but none of them means anything. Nothing leads to anything else. So how can it show you where the Grail is?" Great-uncle Mary pointed at the manuscript. "Remember what the text says, for the proper man in the proper place to find." "Perhaps it's like one of those mazes you see in books sometimes," Jane said, thinking hard. "The ones that are simple once you get going, but it's awfully hard to find where to start. That could be what he meant by in the proper place. If you took the map to the right starting point, then it would tell you where to go from there." Simon almost wailed. "But how do we find out where to start from?" Barney, standing at Great-uncle Mary's elbow, had not been listening. He had lapsed into one of those dreaming silences, gazing wide-eyed out over the harbor and occasionally glancing back at the map. "I know what it reminds me of," he said musingly. No one took any notice. Barney went on dreamily to himself. "It's like one of Mother's drawings, the ones she calls perspective sketches. It looks like a picture. Not a map at all, really. You've got the bump of this hill coming over the edge of the harbor when you look down, and the headland curving like that." He traced his finger through the air over the view before him. "And those stones on top of it make the funny little knobs on the side of the map." "Golly, he's got it!" Simon shouted, jerking Barney out of his reverie. "That's what it is, look! It's a picture and not a map, and that's why the shape looked all wrong compared with the guidebook. Look, you can see—" He took the manuscript carefully from Great-uncle Mary's hands and held it up in front of them, against the long rocky arm of Camar Head. And as they looked from the headland back to the manuscript, the scrawled brown lines suddenly seemed so obviously a picture of the scene before them that they wondered how they could have possibly thought it was a map. "Well then," Jane said, incredulity spreading over her face as she looked from one to the other, This must be the proper place, the beginning of the maze. All this time, without knowing it, we've been standing on the very same spot as the man who drew the picture. Just think." She looked at the manuscript in awe. "Well, come on," Barney said, glowing with excitement at what he had discovered. "We know where he started from. How do we find out where he went from there?" "Look at the picture. There's a sort of blotch marked on this headland." "There are blotches all over the place. Half of them are blots and the rest are dirt marks." "The marks of age," Great-Uncle Mary said sepulchrally. "No, but this one's intentional," Simon persisted. "Right here, where... Gosh, it must be that rock you're leaning on, Gameri." His great-uncle looked round critically. "Well, it's possible, I suppose. Yes, indeed, it's possible. A natural outcropping, I think, not directed by the hands of men." Barney got up and trotted all round the rock, gazing closely at its yellow lichened scars and every small crevice and cleft, but noticing nothing unusual. "It looks very ordinary," he said in disappointment, reappearing at the other side. Jane burst out laughing. "You look just like Rufus, sniffing along after a rabbit and then finding there's nothing there after all." Barney slapped his knee. "I knew we should have brought Rufus. He'd have been terrifically useful on a hunt, sniffing things out." "You can't sniff things out where they've been hidden for centuries, idiot." "I don't see why not. You wait. I bet you he'll help." "Not a hope." "Where is he, anyway?" "With Mrs. Polk. Shut up somewhere, I suppose, poor thing. You know Father said he wouldn't have him in the house any more when he got in a rage the other night." "Mrs. Polk takes him home every evening." "If she hadn't taken him home yesterday evening, he might have caught the burglars." "Gosh, so he would." There was a moment's silence as they all digested the thought. "I don't trust Mrs. Polk," Jane said darkly. "Well, don't worry about it," Great-Uncle Mary said easily. "From what I know of that dog, he'd just have licked their hands and told them to go ahead." "He doesn't like Mr. Withers," Barney said. "He came to meet us wagging his tail when he came in off the boat yesterday, but when he saw Mr. Withers, his tail went right down and he barked. We all laughed about it at the time," he added thoughtfully. "Well, we'll bring him out tomorrow, but we shall have to go home soon, and we still aren't any nearer the beginning. Gameri, could this rock really mean anything?" Simon rubbed its gray surface doubtfully. "Perhaps it's in line with something," Jane said hopefully, "like a compass bearing. Look on the map. I mean the picture." "Doesn't help. It could be in line with any of those blotches." "Well, then, we ought to find out where all the blotches are and go and see if there's anything near one of them." "But that would take months." "Oh," Barney stamped his foot with impatience, "this is awful. What are we going to do?" "Leave it," Great-Uncle Mary said unexpectedly. "Leave it? Leave it?" They stared at him. "Leave it until tomorrow. Come to it with fresh minds. We haven't much time, and it's going to be a race in the end, but we're all right at the moment. The other side doesn't know that we've found anything. They watch me like hawks, but they don't suspect you, and with any luck, they won't. You can afford to go away and think about it for tonight." "Won't they come back and burgle us again?" Jane said nervously. "They wouldn't dare. No, that was a long shot. They staked everything on being able to find a clue the first time, and they failed. They'll try something different now." "I wish we knew what." "Great-Uncle Mary," Simon said, "why can't we tell the police it was them? Then they wouldn't be able to come after us at all." "Yes," said Jane eagerly. "Why not?" "We can't possibly," Barney said with conviction. "Why not? Why not?" "I don't know." They looked at Great-Uncle Mary. He said non-committally, Why didn't you tell the police that you thought you knew what the burglars had been after?
Well, they'd have laughed. They'd have thought it was just an old bit of paper. And if we'd gone to them, it wouldn't have been a secret anymore, and we wouldn't have been able to follow up the map. And anyway, Jane said, with a return of the old guiltiness, we hadn't told Mother and Father about finding it in the first place.
Well, Great-Uncle Mary said, you would have said to them, we found an old parchment in the attic, and we think that's what the burglars were looking for when they turned the house upside down. And our worthy sergeant, who is satisfied that the culprits were just hooligans, would have smiled indulgently and told you to go away and play.
That's right. That's just it. That's why we didn't.
Great-Uncle Mary smiled. Now, I could go to him and say this manuscript is a clue to a kind of ancient cup called a grail that is hidden in Trewisic. It tells the real story of King Arthur. The man from the yacht called the Lady Mary wants it, and he burgled the house, and he has me followed day and night to discover if I have found it before him. And what would happen?
They'd go and arrest Mr. Withers, Simon said hopefully, but he sounded less convinced than before.
The sergeant would go to Mr. Withers, who would of course have a perfect alibi for the night of the burglary, and he would question him rather apologetically about my odd-sounding story. Mr. Withers would impress him as a courteous and gentlemanly antique dealer on a harmless holiday with his pretty sister.
That's what we thought he was, Barney pointed out.
The sergeant knows of me, Great-Uncle Mary went on, and knows I do things that sometimes seem, he chuckled, eccentric. He would think things over, and he'd say to himself, poor old professor, 'tis all been too much for him at last. All that book learning, 'tidn't natural. It do have turned the poor old chap's head.
You do it even better than Simon, Jane said admiringly. I see now, Simon said. It would just sound fantastic. And if we told the sergeant about Mr. Withers and his sister asking questions about old books, it would just seem perfectly normal to him and not suspicious at all. He looked up and grinned. Of course, we couldn't possibly tell them. Sorry, I didn't think.
Well, you must think now, and seriously, Great-Uncle Mary said, turning his grave... Let me see how much more I have here for you guys. Turning his grave, dark eyes on each face in turn. I'm going to say something I shan't say again. You may think the same as the sergeant would, that this is all business of a private rivalry, an old professor and a book collector, both intent on beating the other to something that doesn't matter much to anyone else anyway.
No, of course not. It's much more than that, Jane said impulsively. I've got a feeling.
Do you guys want me to finish out the chapter? Thumbs up? Okay, I don't know. I haven't looked at the clock in a while. Well, if you all have a feeling, if you understand just a little of the things I was trying to say earlier on, then that's more than enough. But I'm not happy about having the three of you mixed up in this at all, and I should be even less happy if I thought you didn't have any idea of what you were doing.
You make it sound fearfully serious, Simon said curiously.
So it is. I worry because I can only be on the edge all the time, acting as a decoy, making them think they have nobody to bother about except me, so that if you are left all on your own with the responsibility of unraveling this. He touched the manuscript in Simon's hand, step by difficult step.
Smashing, Barney said happily. Simon glanced at his brother and sister and drew himself up, trying to look as dignified as it is possible to look in shorts and sandals. Well, I'm the eldest. Only by 11 months, said Jane. Well, I am, anyway, and I'm responsible for you two, and I ought to be spokesman, And he floundered and then gave up all attempt at dignity in a rush. And honestly, Gameri, we do know what we're doing. In a way, it is a kind of quest, like Barney said. And it isn't as if we were altogether on our own.
All right, Great Uncle Mary said. It's a bargain.
And he shook hands solemnly with each of them in turn. Everyone looked at everyone else, wide-eyed and a little breathless. And then they all suddenly felt rather foolish, and burst out laughing.